Hey everyone, hope you are doing good. I appreciate that this is going to come as quite a surprise to a lot of people that weren't aware of this coming. I've spoken about this on and off for like years now, and for the last 6 years at least, I've always wanted to tell my side of a particular story that happened 15 years ago, and I've told it to many people, usually after a few drinks at a bar. Could be with people, could like friends, it could be with strangers, it could be work colleagues, and it was always to give me some sense of vindication. But I never spoke about it publicly for reasons that will become apparent. And so just to lay the groundwork for this episode, there is no usual sections, the vitamin G stuff we do, which we might do at the end, we'll see. I'm basically taking this opportunity to tell you a story about my life, and I've got 15 pages of notes in front of me. And on the one hand, this kind of thing lends itself to doing a video and not a live stream. A video, you can take your time with it, you can record what you want to say, and then you can edit it afterwards and make sure it's tight. But for me, one of the aversions I ever had about talking about this story was I don't want it to come across as this kind of polished narrative. I just want to sort of speak from the heart of what I had going on. And doing it live allows me to do that. And I didn't want to sensationalize it. I know the title is a bit clickbaity, but like you could go a lot more clickbaity. The thumbnail is very ambiguous. I just didn't know what to do. And so for anyone who is completely confused about what I'm even talking about, a lot of people don't know what this is about. And so the way I'm going to introduce this is by saying that in 2009, I went through probably the most horrible situation in my life, and it ruined me for well over a decade. I'm still dealing with aspects of it now. It's still to my core. And there are certain things that have happened along the way where I've realised telling the story could help at least one person, because someone shared their story and it helped me, and I kind of feel that responsibility. But the reason I haven't told the story is classic. It's the cliche of why victims don't come forward with their story. One, it's they're scared of not being believed. And secondly, they're scared of facing retribution and like flaring things up again. So although I've got the live chat in front of me right now, and I want to thank anyone that's watching, and if you're watching on replay, hello to you as well. I know there are people that perhaps don't watch me regularly but have known me for a while and kind of want to hear this. Friends of mine have probably heard bits and pieces. I had a good friend of mine who popped over this morning, and I'd always told him about some of the stuff I was dealing with over the years, but I actually never told him the origin story. And so I went through it with him this morning, and it was actually kind of good practice for this. But cards on the table. There's going to be a lot of cards on the table. I'm feeling very tense right now. This is going to be a very emotional to go through. I don't know how I'm going to feel, but this really feels like the closing of a big chapter that has controlled me for a lot of my life. So the truth is, and the reason ready is in brackets on this title, is I've wanted to wait until I felt ready to talk about this. And the reality is you'll never feel ready. And so you just got to do it. And I'm very fortunate to have an amazing community and support networks. But I kind of also just want to get my side on the record. Okay, so I've got some notes here. I'm going to go through it, and maybe we'll have a discussion at the end, but we'll wait and see. Okay, we ready? Okay. So back in 2009, it was when I was full swing as like a YouTuber, a vlogger. And at that time, I'd recently come out of a relationship, my first relationship, which didn't end well. This is not for me to bring up that relationship in particular, but I'm just providing some context. I was incredibly insecure. I think I was like 22. It was someone I'd lost my virginity to, and then they cheated on me. It wasn't particularly nice. And so I was very insecure as a result, and like at a part of my life where I was trying to get a sense of who I was when building relationships. And when I say relationships, I mean any relationships, professional, friendships, actual relationships, what have you. And one day I discovered, I always and I still am today, I love meeting and connecting with new people from around the world, from all walks of life. I discovered a photographer online on social media, and she did the most incredible photography. And the way I describe it, it was like digital art. So she might do a photo where she's holding onto a balloon and she's like floating off in the sky. She would do these really dark pieces about, I guess, dealing with trauma or mental health. Some real stuff about existentialism. Really, really powerful stuff. And so we connected. And she posted on a website called Flickr, which I think is still going, and she could post daily on it. Her art, and what she'd do is she'd post this amazing photo, and along it, kind of feels like the old MySpace days, she would accompany it with a blog post of whatever was on her mind or whatever the piece was trying to say. So we got chatting, we met up and hung out from time to time, and she even featured on a couple of my videos that aren't online anymore, but we became pretty good friends. She had a boyfriend, but she would often tell me about how he was causing problems and wasn't being particularly nice to her. And it's one of those things that when you hear people complain about other halves, at first you're like, okay, it may be, just issues, these will work out. But as things went on, it seemed that it was a lot more serious. Now, she wouldn't disclose what she had going on with him, but I would communicate, as I have done with any friend that's going through stuff, that they shouldn't have to put up with it, and they do deserve better. Now, I can't remember the timeline exactly, but this would have been in 2009. But one day, I received a phone call from her out the blue, and she told me that a close friend of hers had been in a car crash and had been on life support, and they had recently turned the machine off, and so they died. And obviously, I expressed my condolences, and she mentioned that it had understandably got her thinking about life and what's important and things like that. And so she asked me how things were between us, and what I wanted out of what we had. And I communicated that we were friends, and I sort of left it at that. And she said, she asked basically if we could, if it was foreseeable that we could become more than just friends. And I basically said, well, no, but never. I said no, and she went, but are you talking about ever? And I'm like, never say never. And she pushed me for a definitive answer. And I said that I wouldn't want anyone to ever wait for me in life. And so, because I'm not sure of myself, if she wanted a definitive answer, the answer was no. And so she hung up on me, clearly upset. And I felt bad, but I do think it was the right thing to do. I don't want to lead people on. And so I wasn't sure how things were going to go, but we got chatting again. We hung out at a YouTube event weeks later, and everything seemed okay. Now, I think it was about October 2009. I was at hers, used to visit each other from time to time, and she told me she'd recently broken up with her ex and had mentioned feeling better for it and freer and stuff, which was great. We chatted, we hung out that night, we drank a bit, and we went to bed. And there we started making out, and things escalated. She got on top of me, and it was clear that it was going somewhere. And I said pretty bluntly that we were just friends, and that if we were going to do more, that friends is all we were. And she said okay, and we slept with each other. Now, I instantly knew the next day that was a bad idea. And in the context of everything that happened before, it was probably an oversight on my part. Someone's already expressed having feelings for you, probably should completely close that off. But I felt like we had an open dialogue. I thought it was mutually understood. But yeah, that was, in this story, it's not about like me being completely clear of stuff. Like, I definitely think I've screwed up along the way in this story. Now, I wore protection. I'm someone who's always been very careful with that kind of thing. I checked afterwards and threw it away. Yeah, I've always been a cautious person. Now, it was probably a few weeks later. It was in November time, and it was her birthday coming up. And so I had a birthday card, I remember, and I was currently working in London at BBC Television. It was my first job, having finished university. And so I travelled from London, got to my home, which was quite a journey. And while I was getting ready, because it was like a 90-minute drive to hers, I get a text. I get a text from her. And she was asking if I was still coming. And I said, yeah. And she said she had something to tell me. So I naturally asked what. And she said she would tell me once I got to her house. And I mentioned, it's going to be like a 90-minute drive to yours. That's a long time to be suspicious. So can you just tell me? And so she said that she was pregnant. I was shocked, confused, and without, completely genuinely, I asked who with, because I wore protection, stuff like that. And she just texted the words, you. Now, the drive to her house was always a bit of a long drive. It felt extra long on this occasion. Now, I got to her house and she was in the garden and she was smoking a cigarette. And so I asked her to stop smoking. I said, hey, if you're pregnant, smoking's not a good idea. So she put it out. And so we had a conversation about the situation and what we both wanted to do. And in my case, I mentioned that I wasn't ready to be a father and not in this circumstance. And she expressed a mutual feeling. And so we both agreed that we weren't going to have the child. Now, I said I would take her, I'd take her to the clinic and I'd help with anything else. And yeah, she says that, yeah, if you could take me, that would be great. Just let me know. So this was a time when I was very busy with my first job since leaving school. And in hindsight, throughout this entire story, I always think I could have been better at communicating. But the rate at which I communicate people, and you can ask some of my closest friends, sometimes I'm really bad at getting back to people. That's just how I've always been. It's often not the things that I do, it's about the things that I don't do. And I was at work one day, I was working for BBC Comedy Online, and I suddenly received a text from her saying that she'd changed her mind and was no longer going to the clinic, which felt like a huge an emotional swing, because in one hand I had a trajectory in life going one way, and then all of a sudden it went the other way, and it was like, oh my goodness, so right, we're having a kid now. And in that moment, that emotional swing really overwhelmed me, and so I went into an edit booth where one of my colleagues was, and I just burst into tears, and I was talking to him about it. It was very emotional, and he was incredibly supportive. Now, bit of fun to the story, okay, just to break this up a bit. Anyone in the UK will know of this person that was running for Mayor of London called Count Binface. It's a guy that wears a massive bin on his head, or trash can, and he's running for office. He does it quite a lot, and he's like an extraterrestrial from a trash planet. Always a joke. My colleague, who I was crying to in this edit booth, he actually ended up, he is Count Binface. So there we got that. Random bit of trivia. Look it up online if you want. So word got out to my department manager, who took me aside and offered support, saying there are services for this, etc. It was all very, very good. And actually, Matt Callanan, who's in the chat at the moment, he was actually working at the BBC with me during this time. And I just felt immense shame at this moment. I didn't expect my life to change this way so early, and I also felt completely out of control with everything. Sorry that I'm talking like slowly and at a pace. It's just that I want to make sure that, obviously, because I'm live streaming, I want to make sure I get my thoughts right and go through this in a concise way, because there's a lot here. So me and the girl met up at my place to have a discussion, and I was living at my late grandmother's home at the time, and we had a long discussion about things. I mentioned that I didn't want to have the child. I think I was 22, 23 at the time, but I respected her decision. And caught in the emotion again in hindsight, I think probably at the time I was stronger in my words than I should have been. And when I say that, I don't mean aggressive or anything like that, but I was just very, very emotional. So there's that. Now, she mentioned putting the baby up for adoption, to which I said no. I says, if we have this child, I want to be there for my child. But I did say, if we have the child, it isn't going to mean that we're going to be in a relationship. We will still be friends. We will still be amicable, and we'll be getting along as good parents. But having this child is not going to be like meaning that we're going to be in a relationship. And I noticed in that moment, I remember the look she gave me, there was a massive sea change in her perspective. And I don't know if this was mentioned when this happened, because everything is obviously blurred from 15 years ago, but she had mentioned at some point that the reason she'd broken up with her ex was because she liked me. I think it might have been mentioned that evening. It was around this kind of time. And so, yeah, I felt guilty in some ways about that as well. She mentioned she was going to go for a walk, and she went outside and came back 5 to 10 minutes later, saying that she wanted to have the abortion. And I reaffirmed my commitment to taking her and giving her any support that she needed afterwards. So I think it was like the day before her appointment, I sent her a message to confirm like where she needed me to be to pick her up and where to take her, and I heard nothing. And sometimes I would message her and I'd hear back from her the same days, and sometimes I wouldn't hear from her for days afterwards. So I just let it slide, and messaged her first thing in the morning of the day that I was meant to be taking her, and I didn't hear anything, which left me worried. It was the question of like, have things changed again? Is it that she doesn't want to go through with this? In which case, I need to support her and with those things. And I think it was I don't think it was the same day. I think it was the day after she was meant to be at the clinic. I just received a text message from her saying, "Hey," and I asked, "Where are you?" And she goes, "I'm at home." And so in that moment, I drove over to her. And she lived with her parents. I think one of them answered the door, and I went upstairs and she was lying on her bed. And so I jumped on the bed with her. I hugged and consoled her. And she was very, very quiet and mentioned that she'd been to the clinic. I think she might have mentioned it beforehand on text, but at this point I'd known. And yeah, she didn't say much. And then all of a sudden she sat up and she was staring intensely at the wall opposite. And she mentioned that she was able to see this baby crawling across the floor. She was having some vision of something. And hearing that scared me. Like, it scared me because I was like, what's happened to her? And I remember just bursting into tears. And I can't remember what happened next. I think I might have left that day. But I did say that I did say that I would be getting her some help. So I think it was a couple of days later, and I was live streaming on a website back then called stickam.com. For those that know my background, I used to do an event every year called Stick Aid, which was a 24-hour live show, charity thing for UNICEF. This wasn't that. This was a smaller sort of charity event. I think it was for some cause or something. But I was live streaming on Stickam in the evening, and I get a call from her. So I step away from the computer and I answer. And she says, "Hey, Myles, I just want to say thank you so much for being so supportive for me. I just want to thank you." And I was like, what's going on? And sorry, the other reason I'm being cautious here is I'm always mindful I don't want to say her name, just for privacy's sake. Like, who she is not the important part of the story. So that's why I'm being extra cautious as well. Yeah, she was like, "I just want to thank you for everything." And I was like, what's going on? And she says, "Oh, I've had it with life. It's exhausting, and before I leave it, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for me. And I asked her where she was, and she goes, "Oh, I'm just outside, just walking about." And so I asked her to go home, and she calmly said, "No, I'm fine. Thank you though. Thank you so much." And so I asked her again to go home, and she said no. So it got to a point. And no, I'm not gonna. Someone in the chat saying I should assign a fake name. No, I'm not. I'm not gonna use any name. Where was I? No, I said you should go home. I said go home, or I'm gonna call the police. And she just like switched and got incredibly aggressive and said, "Don't do that. If you dare call the police, I will never forgive you again." And I remember very starkly saying this exact thing. I said to her in that moment, "If you not forgiving me is the price I have to pay for you to be all right, then so be it. I'm calling the police." And she hung up on me. So in this moment, I phoned a good friend of mine who knew little parts of this situation. And I said, "Dude, I need to get there now. I don't want to go alone. Can you please come with me?" And he was like, "Sure, come to mine, pick me up, and then we'll head there." And I kid you not, as I started leaving the house, it started snowing super heavy. So much so that within like a few minutes of the journey, my car was already sliding around the road. Now, this was going to be a long journey if there was no snow. I got to my friend's house, whose mother was there, and she said she didn't want us going because of the weather. Sensible. And I think the freeway to get there was shutting down because of it, or was like incredibly congested. So I called the police. And the police called me back 10 minutes later saying that she was found safe and well and she was at home. And I felt relieved, and I was about to text her, but I got a text from her, an incredibly angry text saying, "I told you not to call to the police, never talk to me again," or something to that effect. And so I went home. And it was in this moment that I remember she once told me about how her parents had once called the police on her for disappearing, and she hadn't gone anywhere or something like that. I don't know. I always remember in that moment that kind of came back to me. So anyway, it was the next day. There was still a lot of snow outside and on the roads, and I drove to hers and said, "I'm getting you help right now." So we got in my car and we went to a nearby hospital, and that she directed me to. I asked her to tell me where the nearest hospital was. We went there and we went to A&E. And after about 2 hours of waiting, it felt like more, we were then told to go to a different hospital. Now, I can't remember the reason why. It was something like you've come to the wrong hospital or something like this. I have no idea what it was about. I don't think there's jurisdiction when it comes to hospitals. I don't know. For some reason, we were told to go to a different hospital. So we did. Waited what must have been another couple of hours. And this was like on a Saturday or a Sunday. And then we were seen by a nurse. And he asked her questions just about her condition, and she mentioned that she spoke about nightmares, and she told me in the past that she had sometimes had nightmares about me, and whenever I asked what the nightmares were about, she couldn't tell me. She was scratching herself, and I think she'd even tried to take an overdose of paracetamol, some tablets, but one of the things I noticed was she was asked what clinic she went to for the abortion, and she couldn't name it. And this was December 19th, 2009. And she was basically told with a doctor's note. And by the way, I've got the doctor's note here. Obviously, I'm not showing it, but it's the one thing I still have from it from 2009 with my number on it and her details. And they asked her to see a crisis team, to book an appointment, and I think to get a prescription on antidepressants. And I asked her, "Do you want me to sort this out for you?" "I will." And she said, "No, don't do that. I'll sort it out." So I dropped her off home, and it became apparent very quickly that she didn't follow up with any of this. Right. This is when it really kicks off. You ready for this? It was days later, and I noticed as a part of her daily post on her Flickr account, she posted something really shocking. Now, when I mention what this is, you're going to know, well, actually, we live in an age now where AI generation is pretty inventive. When I explain this, you're going to realise this isn't made up. She posted a photo of her wearing a white gown, I think kneeling on the floor, sitting on the floor, and she was covered in blood. And behind her was a cot. And the cot was filled with blood. And written in blood on the wall, and this is obviously fake and great, like digital art that she did. She had written on the blood on the wall something like, "Why, mummy?" ? And it was accompanied with a blog post about abortion, just generally about abortion. I obviously was fucking horrified, and I started looking up private therapy for her. And again, in hindsight, I feel as though I didn't act as quickly as I could have. I screwed up there. Okay, so I found I think 3 options near her. I think a female therapist, 2 male ones, sort of different locations around hers. And so I emailed her and I said, look, I've got this private therapy. It's going to be quicker. I think because at this time maybe I didn't know she wasn't following up, but I know that NHS stuff can be slower. And so I said, I'm prepared to pay for therapy. I've got these 3 options. Tell me which therapist you prefer seeing, and I'll get you to see them straight away. Okay? Now, she replied, thanking me for help. This was on email. And she said, but I'm okay and I don't need it. Okay? But I understand the dynamics that when you're depressed, I've been depressed. I know what it's like when people offer help. You don't want to be a burden on other people. You don't want to accept help because you don't want to get in people's way. That is a completely normal thing to respond with. And so I followed up saying, honestly, it is okay. I really want to help because it's what I've promised and it's what you need. And she turned it down again, once again, thanking me. And so I then responded, and this is the last time I ever messaged her 15 years ago. And I basically expressed something to the effect of, I can give you all the tools that you need to get better, but you need to want the help yourself, or else there's nothing else I can do. And in an aggressive tone, she snapped on email and said something. I think she said, "Fuck you, Myles. You've never been there for me. You've absolutely ruined me." And I didn't respond. So I can't remember if it was the same day or it was the next day, but she posted again on her daily Flickr account. This time it was an image of her with mascara tears and I think some message written on the wall behind her in a mascara tone. I can't remember what it was. And it was accompanied by a blog post exposing me. She had a huge following, saying, "This is the guy you've seen me with, Myles. He led me on. He got me pregnant. He forced me to have an abortion, and then he ditched me." And she included all my details on there. I can't remember what contact details, if it was my phone number or stuff like that. And in shock, I made a stupid mistake of PR management. The first thing I did was I shared the post on my Facebook and with a caption like, "How do I respond to this?" And I started suddenly getting, some people in the chat are already saying they remember it. I believe the message on the wall was F Myles Dyer. Maybe it was, I can't remember. So I started getting pretty negative messages from my connections on Facebook, and I deleted the blog post, but it didn't matter. The floodgates had opened, not just about what I'd shared, but just because her post was out there. And my Facebook messages inbox was filling up with so much anger. And I started responding to them individually, saying, I totally understand why you would think this, but what she's saying isn't true. And some of them would respond to me saying, because it just felt like the mob mentality you get on social media, people see something unjust and they want to call you a scumbag, and it's totally understandable. And they said stuff like, "You seem totally reasonable, but I don't believe you." I remember explicitly someone said, I don't believe you. She wouldn't have posted something like this unless there was some truth to it. Okay? There's a lot of people asking me questions about the story. I just asked you, let me get to the end of the story, because like I think we're halfway through. There's a lot more to come. And my world basically fell apart from this moment. For hours, for days, for weeks, months, and in many ways, for years. I spoke with a good friend of mine who helped me with some social media campaigns, asking what I could do legally to protect myself. And he says it was possible to get my details taken down from the post, which he promised to work on. But this girl started doing follow-up blogs and social posts about me, rallying her supporters. And by the way, if people want to ask rhetorical questions, it totally makes sense. But like, if people are generally curious about stuff, let me get to the end of it. And she started like, there was like gossip websites. I think you can still find them today. There's gossip forum posts about me, about what a scumbag I was. She was asking people who knew me personally to email her with their stories. So like, she was asking people that had dated me and stuff. And she started insinuating that I had been a terrible person to countless women, one of whom was my ex. And she was clearly trying to make sure that people knew what a monster I was. So I contacted my ex, and by the way, someone says, move on, dude. Dude, this is exactly what the fuck I'm doing right now. So yeah. Just to be clear, this is called fucking moving on, man. It's called getting it off your chest so you can close a chapter to it. I said I wouldn't respond to people, but like, some people just need to get a grip. And also, you're going to realise at the end why I'm telling this story publicly. It's going to become very, very obvious, because the only reason I am where I am right now is because someone told their story. So I contacted my ex and I said, can I call you? And she didn't respond. And so I followed up saying, you've been talking to this girl. And I'm currently in the process of taking legal action. And so I need to know the details of what you've spoken about. And so my ex called me and she sounded quite panicked, because obviously she didn't want to get caught up in it. And I explained it wasn't true, that she was unwell and that I'm trying to sort it out. And I wasn't on good terms with my ex. Again, I don't really want to get into the details, but like, one of the last things that happened with my ex was she cheated on me with someone she was working with. That happens. Like, she wasn't happy with me, clearly. I don't hold anything against her, like looking back now. And the kind of person I am, that some people will say, like, you're a cuck, was I dropped my ex off in town with her bags to the guy that she was cheating on me with. That's the kind of person I am. Some of you will say I'm a cuck. Other people might realise that I was someone that was just trying to take care of her because she was visiting from outside the UK. I promised her parents I'd take care of her. The reason I mentioned this was she was cheating on a guy with me on a guy who had a fiance, and I ended up telling the fiance that they were cheating, and my ex naturally fucking hated me for that and had always tried to look at ways to get back at me, and I understand it. And this is kind of what was going. So one of the last things I asked my ex was, I asked my ex if she believed her after speaking to her, and my ex says, I remember very clearly, one of the last things my ex said on the phone call was, I think she's full of shit. And we ended it there. So my details did get taken down from the blog post, but people already knew who I was. It was already out there. And I assume my friend had actually spoken to her and got it taken down. So gossip on forums, social media everywhere. I couldn't escape it. Social media to me felt like a prison. Going to public events felt horrible. If I went to YouTube events, people are socially awkward at YouTube events and internet events. When people weren't talking to me or weren't responding, it's because some people just like didn't hear you or didn't respond or stuff like that. Everything for me was like a microaggression of they know this story about me. They think I'm a scumbag, and it was just horrible. And this lasted for years. Lasted for years and years and years. Okay. Right. And by the way, like people asking about how I was with my ex being gracious, I was definitely not perfect. I was definitely an emotional mess when this all kicked off. And so again, life is complicated, and I've definitely made mistakes, and I never want to come across as like, oh, I'm fucking perfect, 'cause I'm not. I'm definitely a hugely flawed individual. Okay. So within a week of her posting this blog, I received an understandably angry message from her ex, the ex that she had left because she liked me. And he said something like, I always knew you were a scumbag. And I responded to him. And I said, like I said to these other people, I totally understand where you're coming from, but what she said wasn't true, and she needs help. I said, this help can't come from me because she sees me as this evil person that's ruined her, a part of this delusionment. But I'm still prepared to pay for this private therapy, but it's got to come from you. And he was like, okay. He was a bit surprised by me saying this. And so, and I think I mentioned this already. During this whole ordeal, she mentioned she had all these nightmares about me and not being able to tell me what they were about. And she clearly had some deep-rooted negative connotations with me. So every evening after work, when I was walking home from the train station, I would be texting her ex, seeing how things were getting on. And he was trying to organise it. And by the end of the first week, I had a message saying something along the lines of, you were totally right, Myles. She isn't well. She was caught running around outside last night with a knife. She's been sectioned. I don't know what's that's called in other countries, but she was basically institutionalised. And I think I even got told that she tried to hang herself. And I never heard from him. I never heard from him again. I even remember his name fully, and that's what happens with this stuff. So, long-term impact of like and by the way, this isn't the end of the story, but the long-term impact of what this did to me was I felt isolated. I never knowing what people really thought about me. I struggled to use social media because I never knew what messages or tag posts I was going to see next. Sometimes I had to get friends to search social media on my behalf. I started getting conditions like grinding my teeth. I had to get a mouth guard. I'd be spitting out blood most mornings because I was grinding my teeth so much at night. And the mind fucks kept on coming because I think like 2 years later, I get a message out of the blue. And this is the thing. This is why I couldn't use social media, because every day I didn't know what I was going to be seeing next, being reminded of like what a scumbag I was. I had a message. I think it was like within a couple of years. I had a message out of the blue on Facebook, and all it said was, "Is this your child?" And it was a link. And I click it, and it was a post by this girl holding a baby with a caption like, "I'm glad outside of all this bad, some good came with it." And the name of the child was called Milo, with her last name. I'm not saying it, obviously. And so I was at my cousin's getting a haircut who had a kid. And I asked her for advice. And so I looked up the photo on social media the night I'd slept with her. And I said, right, this is the day I've slept with her. And this is the picture of the baby that she's showing. Is this my child? And my cousin was like, there's no way that's your kid. And as was the case a lot of the time, I was 95% sure that I didn't have a kid. Or that she was even pregnant. But the 5% or 2% of uncertainty is the thing that was killing me inside. It genuinely was eating me inside. And so I suffered with a complete breakdown of trust. It wasn't, and there's a really like nuanced distinction I'm going to make here. I'm someone, and it was the same with like my ex who cheated on me. I don't believe in. I gave my ex a lot of freedom to go and see whoever she wanted and hang out with, and she cheated on me. And a lot of people, there's a lot of cases where people would like, I'm never going to trust anyone again. I'm going to be controlling. No, next time I have a relationship, I'm going to give them the freedom to do whatever they want, because if they're the right person, they're not going to cheat. I believe in that. But the nuanced perspective I'm going to have, right, because I don't like to paint people with the same brushes, it wasn't that I could no longer trust. It wasn't that I could no longer trust anyone. It was that I could no longer trust my own judgment. Now, arguably, that results in the same outcome, but there is a difference, and hopefully you understand that. It's not that I thought no one was trustworthy. It was like, this was someone that I trusted. I wore protection. I was super, super careful, all this sort of stuff. And my world absolutely fell apart. Absolutely fell apart. And so how could I deal with this? And so for 9-10 years, I didn't have any relationships. I didn't have any sexual relationships with anyone. I couldn't bring myself to it. And I entered a weird world of living complete fantasies where for the 10 years, I would just chat with women all the time online, talking about meeting up and stuff. And then if anything ever got close to being a reality, I'd freak out internally and then step away. Or just like, even if I wasn't explicitly doing it, I would just break down inside. And on rare occasions, very rare occasions, I might meet up with someone and it wouldn't go well. So for one example, I remember very clearly, there was a girl that I met either on a dating site or something that I tried. She came over, we had a great time together. We went to bed, we made out. She wanted to have sex and I said no, which I know is a really weird thing for a guy to say. So she got up and she just left and I never heard from her again. And I just like this constant feeling of guilt, this constant feeling of shame. I didn't feel like a functioning human being. So this is from the age for me of like 23 to like, or probably from the age of 22, 23 to like 31, 32. And I started developing toxic behaviors. I started using cam sites. I've spoken about this openly before. And I used cam sites where you pay huge amounts of money to speak with, in my case, women on camera, usually used for sexual gratification. I didn't use it for it. I used it to just chat because it felt safe. I was like, I'm here chatting with someone who is giving me attention, giving me love. And I think, like, even if I didn't feel it on the surface, deep down, I knew that this wasn't real and that there was no chance for me to get hurt because this is all fake. However, there are times where I would get along with someone and then they would disappear because they were only doing it for money and I felt rejected, and that feeds into the cycle of guilt. That's a story for a whole other time. And whenever I met with people, could be colleagues, could be friends, could be strangers for drinks, I would always end up telling this story. And it would end up with them saying, so she wasn't really pregnant, was she? And it would give me like 0.01% reassurance from them every time I talked about it. But the remaining percent of uncertainty was the thing that still dictated my life, because I thought, what if I have a kid out there and she's like chatting all this shit to it? What if all of that is going on? And I still have that to this day, by the way. I got a text from her maybe like 7 years ago with the words "help me," and I didn't respond. That's the last I ever heard from her, and I couldn't, because I felt any engagement would just spark it up all again. And so I just didn't respond. And I've always wanted to tell publicly my side of the story, but I just haven't been able to, because I've been too scared to ever talk about it and bring it up again. So I've just endured it, okay? And whenever there was social media drama, this is before the Me Too movement, there was something like it happening in the YouTube space with abuse and stuff like that. And you would see these huge social media pylons of people trying to, like, people say cancelling people, but just holding people accountable. That stuff, and even to this day, triggers me majorly, because regardless of how credible allegations are or not, just the mere seeing of oceans of people laying into someone, destroying them, gives me panic attacks, because I was literally on the receiving end of that. It felt like the whole fucking world hated me in that moment. And I was always scared in bumping into her anywhere. I was always scared of bumping into her anywhere. I moved house, so she didn't have my new address. That felt good, but yeah. So, in 2014, many of you will know I sustained a head injury at work, and I was lucky to be alive, and it's a story for another time. I've got it on my YouTube channel. It's a video called Like My Head Hurts. And it was a long recovery process. It was about 100 days of dealing with severe post-concussion syndrome and then years working on my mental health. But in many ways, this was the event that made me truly hit rock bottom, which some argue is the foundation you need to start building back up your life again. And I remember she tweeted around this time, because sometimes I'd get tagged on stuff. This girl would tweet about me saying how me getting this head injury was well-deserved and it was karma. And then I'd read all these tweets in response saying, yeah, what a scumbag he was and stuff like that. And I just get panic attacks whenever I see myself being talked about this way. And the reason I mentioned this part of the story about the head injury was because this process led to me working on myself again, but it definitely exacerbated a lot of my insecurities and toxic traits that I spoke about before. So, for example, my reliance on cam sites for like safe connection with people got way worse, to the point that I was spending thousands and thousands of pounds. I actually got into debt that my parents had to bail me out of, and I even had like the water cut off at my house at one point. It was that bad. It was that bad. Because what I do is I join a cam site, chat with someone, feel shit because of it, because I've just spent hundreds of pounds, and that feeling of shame and guilt would then reinforce the behaviour that would then make me do it again. So, in 2018, I was on a photo shoot with a good friend of mine who was taking headshots of me. And while talking, she brought up the topic of this girl who had messed me up. And she mentioned that she'd recently posted... that a post had recently been made on her Instagram saying that she'd been found dead. I think that she took her life. But a day or two later, was live streaming on Instagram again, and she said that she was just taking a break. So she wasn't dead. But I was also told that there was a video that had just been posted online by a UK musician on YouTube that I should check out. And I'm not going to mention his name, but it had over 5 million views. And it was being reported on in the media by the UK, the US, Australian news. It was absolutely everywhere. And it was a video called My Children Don't Exist. So this was in 2018. So this is 9 years later. So done a video called My Children Don't Exist, and I started watching it. And within 60 seconds, I felt there's something going on here. And I'm just going to summarize what the story was. It was a 15-minute video. I think he's taken it offline now. But in his story, he had a one-night stand with a girl. She got pregnant and decided to have an abortion, but then she changed her mind last minute. I think that's mentioned right off the bat, and I was like, okay, I totally identify with this. She was expecting twins, and I believe on his channel he had done videos with her or without her. He'd done like a gender reveal video, and bought baby stuff. He had hundreds of thousands of subscribers. He was very well known. But then the story got absolutely wild. She started disappearing. And to really skim over this story, even on the day she was supposed to give birth, he got super confused and discovered things like the ultrasound that she'd sent was actually from someone else's social post. She wasn't in hospital. And she'd also mentioned that her parents had died, and they actually went to the house and realised the parents weren't dead via a mutual friend. And she was even texting stuff saying like, oh, you shouldn't come here, one of the babies has died, you're probably not going to see the other. Really fucked up, manipulative stuff. And so he'd found it very difficult to deal with. But he spoke with immense compassion, saying, this is not about revenge or vitriol, she needs help. And he was clearly heartbroken. So I tried reaching out for our mutual friend, saying, I need to speak to him. I think this could be the same person. And the mutual friend said, we'll put you in touch, but only if you give the name of the girl. And so I did. I gave the name of the girl that hurt me 9 years earlier. So I provided it, and they said, that's her. The girl that had done it to him was the girl that I'd gone through all this stuff 9 years before. And so in that moment, that 99.9999% was getting even closer to 100%. I was like, fuck. I remember like breaking down going, oh my fucking God. She fucking lied to me. Like, it like completely like, Like, I don't know, I was having flashbacks of like how my life had been ruined for 9 years, and like I didn't even believe myself. And so I had a phone call with him for about an hour. And it was really surreal because he just told his story. He'd moved on. He was going on a vacation and moving on with his life. And I basically told him the story that I'm telling you now. And it felt like a parallel universe because for him, this had happened over the past year. And he was very, very distraught. Whereas me, it was kind of like, if he hadn't found that out, I was like what it could have been like for him 9 years later. And I was just a mess. And he was incredibly gracious to me on the phone. And for me, I was like 9 years down the line, never fully knowing the truth. Scared if I had a kid out there being told all these terrible things about me. Being like spoken like I'm a piece of shit by the world. And him and I have never spoken again since. I think I texted him, but he didn't respond, and I can understand that because the association with me is of a bad experience, and he doesn't want that, and he has no. It's not on him to like be there for me. He gave some time, and it was really, really good. So, yeah, he's since taken down the video, and although I felt vindicated whilst feeling completely hollowed out from everything I'd been through. Because it was 9 years of intensity of like not feeling comfortable in my own skin. So, moving forward, I checked myself into a private therapist who was the best therapist I've ever had and introduced me to compassion focused therapy that I talk a lot about. And I learned a lot during that process. I learned that I was abused. I didn't realise it was abuse. I didn't think of it as abuse. It was abuse. I learned that I was suffering with PTSD for 9 years. I learned that I was a victim. I was full of shame. I was full of guilt. And I hated myself. Like, I had huge loathing for myself. And I'd also really come to terms with that I'd lost out on so many opportunities to love others and to be loved. And so since then, I am in a much better place. But you never fully shake off the trauma. It's like grief. You never get rid of it. You just learn how to live with it. And I still have hangovers when it comes to building relationships. When dating people or trying to date, I often over-explain things to make sure we're on the same page. I don't want there to be misunderstandings, and it can make me sound suspicious, which is like a red flag for people. So I often fuck up things there because I'm just like over-explaining things, thinking it's being helpful, but actually it's overcomplicating things. If I'm ever meeting up people to like have fun, I'll always ask about protection. Again, probably excessively, because I'm always paranoid of pregnancy being used against me again. And, you know, look, I'm being completely open about everything here. I went like 9-10 years without having sex or any intimacy with anyone. And like probably the last 5 years now, I probably have sex like once a year, if that. And I was gonna mention this at the end, but like I saw recently this Netflix documentary, Baby Reindeer, which was one of the triggering things for why I'm talking about this now. And there's a bit in it where this guy is like lying in bed and he's just like lying there while he's supposed to be enthusiastic about having sex and he just can't engage with it. And I like that really resonated with me. That's like how I am. It's not that I don't want to enjoy it. It's like there's just something there that's in the way. And maybe I need to get more therapy for that. But yeah, so I'm never fully comfortable and I feel broken still in that way. And then paranoia is still deep within me. I mean, this is kind of like, it's funny, but like you'll totally understand after this story. If I ever have sex with someone, afterwards, sorry if this is really gratuitous and if there's anyone that knows me who finds this awkward. After I have sex, I wash out the condom in the sink, or I flush it completely. I can't put it in a trash can. I can't. And again, it's not because I can't trust anyone anymore. It's I don't trust my own judgment. And I still have bits of it, and that's it. But most importantly, I literally feel like I've been sleepwalking for a decade. Like, I don't even recognise the person I was. Prior to the head injury and all the stuff I was doing, I was so fucked up. So fucked up. Like, fucked up beyond words that I'm explaining right now. So, there's a little bit more to the story. I can't believe we're actually going to nail an hour for this live stream. How about this? Can't believe that. So, since getting therapy, I've overcome a lot. And I always knew the final chapter for me was to finally put my side of the story out there. However, as I've said, I've never felt ready, but you never do. Now, if this guy hadn't done this video telling his story and I hadn't come across it, right now I would still be living that complete and utter nightmare. I'd still be living that complete and utter nightmare. I'd be probably living the rest of my life never knowing the truth and wondering what the fuck is going on. And the tragic irony is that the past 15 years, I have never felt any anger towards her. I've only ever wanted her to be better, to get help, and to be happy. And as I said, I don't want people looking her up or anything on this. This is not what's important. And as I sort of was telling my story to people, I'd hear things like, oh, I want to kill her, or I want to strangle her for what she's fucking done to you. And I've always said, no. And sorry, the sad irony is, I just wish, back in 2009, I just wish the internet had afforded me with the compassion that I had given her all of this time. Because the vitriol, the hate, the death threats, everything in the thousands, just like being drowned in it, couldn't escape. I've never had any of that anger towards her. And her side of the story is the story that's always stood. And I've always been scared to speak up against it for that reason. And also, I learned when I did criminology at university that if you're accused of something that you didn't do, you're better off saying no comment than denying it, even if you have the evidence supporting you, because denial psychologically makes people more susceptible to believing that you're lying. So for myself, I wanted to know what the truth was and be able to move on. And as I said, because that guy posted a video speaking his truth to the world, it helped me. And so I feel a responsibility to tell my story with the hope it will help others out there, even if it's just one. And I also learnt firsthand why people don't come forward with their stories until years later, because I've done exactly that. And it's because, one, I didn't think I was going to be believed by anyone. And two, I was scared of retribution, having her flare up again and make my life hell for another 10 years and stuff like that. But three things happened to me this past week, which together built some internal momentum to get here doing this live stream today. Firstly, last week I was interviewed by a journalist who's doing a podcast about how YouTube started. And we had this preliminary interview about my backstory. And one of the questions I was asked about was there was a period in the YouTube community, I think it was prior to Me Too, it was like a Me Too movement within, because of especially UK YouTubers doing disgusting things with fans. And I was asked about my opinion on it. And I actually then went in and told this story, parts of it, because I found that period incredibly triggering. Because, as I've mentioned, whenever I see people laying into others, I instantly remember how I felt having everyone ganging up against me, regardless of if it's true or not. And so the question was always, believe all women? Should you believe all women? And my nuanced response to that notion is, it's not a question of believing all women, it's taking not just women, but all people seriously. And what I mean by that is when people have allegations, you take it seriously. Despite what happened to me, if it happened all over again, people were right to take her story that she wrote about me and to take her seriously and to provide her with support. That was the right thing to do, which I know for many people probably sounds absolutely ridiculous considering everything that I've been through. People should have taken her seriously, but the idea of like them just absolutely laying into me, that's where it goes too far. However, and this is a conclusion I genuinely believe, and this is a conversation for another time, is if the price we pay to ensure that victims are believed and that justice is acted upon, if the price we pay for that is that a very small percentage of people, like myself, are going to have their lives ruined wrongly, I say, so fucking be it. So fucking be it. And I say that as someone who has had my life tainted for 15 years and desperately ruined for 9 to 10 years. And it was all through my 20s. That was the first thing. The second thing was last week, we did an episode on social media. And I was asked by someone in the chat, what is the worst social media experience I've ever had? And it was caveated, except that experience. And so that put it in my mind as well. And then thirdly, on Sunday, I was trying to watch some stuff. I was feeling shit. My dad's been... a lot of you know about my dad. My dad's got chronic leukemia, which, like, he's getting a lot of checkups. He's not in late stages of it. He just has to be checked up. But he'd been losing a lot of weight lately. It was a bit of a scare. And I was trying to find stuff to do at the weekend. And then on Sunday, I watched a few things that weren't clicking. And then I watched Baby Reindeer, which is on Netflix. And I watched it in its entirety. And if you haven't seen it, it's incredibly powerful. But it was incredibly triggering for me. Because in the first 3 episodes, it just related to everything that I went through. And I love the fact that the guy in the story is very nuanced, where he doesn't come across as like a perfect guy. Like, he made fuck-ups. There were areas where he thought I might have led her on. I shouldn't have done this, done that. And I definitely look at that in my story and things. But it still, he was dealing with someone that was clearly unwell. And also someone who, in the case of Baby Reindeer, I think probably isn't lying. They're saying things that aren't true, but they're a part of their own delusionment. And I think that's the case with this girl in my story. And so yesterday I started writing notes and collecting my thoughts about this story. I've never done it before. Not sure what, if I was going to be able to do this live stream. And thank you for all the best wishes for my dad. But while doing this, I found 2 things. One thing, and I can't show it, but right here, I've got a doctor's note when I took her to the emergency room on the 19th of December 2009, with my phone number. It's her address on here, and it says depression, and it's like needs to have a call with the crisis team and stuff like that. Now, I used to keep all the emails and texts I had from her, but after I got therapy 6 years ago, I deleted them all as a part of my letting go process. So I mentioned letting go earlier, and that was a big part of it. But I've always kept this as this one thing, and I wanted to keep it until I told my story. But the second thing I found out, and this is what makes it really difficult today, and I don't know how I'm going to be as I'm talking about this. I was searching online for dates and stuff. And I discovered her Instagram account. And this is talking about the girl that's been in the story. Her last post was in July of last year. And I don't want to go into specifics so people can't search it. But she was coming to terms with the fact that she knows she's hurt a lot of people. And that she struggles living this life with the mind that she has. And it basically said this post is scheduled, and if you're seeing it publicly, it's because she's no longer around anymore. And that was from the 3rd of July last year. Now, on the one hand, I've been here before. posts have gone up of her saying that she's dead, and then she comes back out and says, actually, no, I was just taking a break. Like, I've been a part of this already, so I never know what to believe. But I looked online, and there's a coroner report I found, but it's hard to tell if it's legit because it's literally just text on a page. And the inquiry date is after the date of the post. But then I've also spoken to someone who worked with her on photography stuff, who told me, I'm not going to use the word confirmed, it's quite strong, but had said that no, she did die and it was from a super overdose. And so I was in tears last night. It was heartbreaking to find this out. And it also made it difficult in this moment that I was about to tell this story. Should I even tell this story? Like, with her having no right to reply, per se. She's already told her story. But I realised that this was... my intentions to tell this story existed before I read that. And... yeah. Telling this story was the right thing to do. So, that, everybody, is my story from 2009. I'm doing a lot better now. I'm still damaged. I'm still working through it. And these are the kind of things that shape who you are as a person. And I'm someone that always believes in compassion. I always just want people to be happy, and I always want there to be justice. And justice is not the same as retribution. And justice isn't the same as not having consequences. I have really weird feelings at the moment. I feel like in this middle ground where like I feel completely empty just because I think I've told it all. I've never told this story fully before. And I think aspects of this story have always pointed out through everything that I do. And I'm always trying to improve who I am, but I know that in my 20s I wasn't a great person because I wasn't able to like foster actual proper relationships and connections with people. I know with the head injury it exacerbated stuff. I don't know, I've come a long way, but I felt alone for a long time because I remember even when the whole pregnancy thing came out, I was calling friends and they didn't know what to say. I think guilt and shame have been big parts of my life throughout. I felt like a failure. And especially when all like the Me Too stuff was kicking off, I felt like I couldn't be an ally because I felt like a fraud because of everything I went through. And I'm at a point in my life now where it's very complicated. I don't want to rush into a relationship, but I'm 37 now. I know it's different for guys than it is for girls. When my dad told me he had cancer, I was obviously upset, but one of the things I was most upset about was the fact that if I have kids, I don't want to have to tell them about my dad. I want them to know about my dad. And I feel like I've lost a lot of time in my life because of it. And I know when it comes to close friendships and families that I am often quite absent. Sorry, this is really against me now. But I think this gets to the crux of it. And it's also like it's me sort of self-analysing, having now got it all out there. But I'm a very hard worker. And people always ask how the fuck I manage to do so many things at once. Like, you do a fucking band, you do a band, you do live shows, you work jobs, you do all this sort of stuff. How do you do it all? And I think, honestly, it's because when you're dealing with grief, it's always about keeping busy, keeping your head down. But I do feel I've lost a lot in the process, like in terms of I've known a lot. I've known a lot of really good people in my life who I've let go of, and it could be in terms of like relationships or even just friendships. And it's because this story has been what's defined me internally. Oh god, I can't believe my voice is like this now. Fucking hell. My favorite quote is from a metal band, and their lyric is, "We're just rehearsing who we think we are," and that is the human condition, which is, you fake it until you become it. You're always in an environment, in a situation, and you're trying to take your next steps in the dance that is life. And the way that your environment responds to you impacts the way that you see yourself. And so for like 9 years, I was seen as I don't know, I just felt the world fucking hated me. And as a result, that bleeds into your DNA. And it's what again, not overtly, this is why you get therapy. There's things on the surface, like, I don't hate myself. But then when you actually look into it, you realise you have a lot of self-loathing and things like that. And, yeah, I think the fact that I'm as upset as I am is kind of because it's taken me 15 years to get to this moment. And in some ways, I can't believe I got here. And so I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone that's tuned in. I know there's a lot of people that are going to be watching this on replay, which is fine. And someone has given me a super chat, which I hope you don't mind putting this on screen. 89 DKK. What is that currency? I feel like a match in the same matchbox. 2009 was a heartbreaking moment for me. Never really healed, but at the same time, I'm doing better now. And I'm glad. And time is a healer. Time is a healer. Time is the ultimate healer, because you have to... The rehearsing who we think we are means you can't just, like, understand a truth and then just get on with it. Like, everything that's in your DNA. And I do think about the text that she sent me saying, help me. But I always knew the help couldn't come from me. And a part of me doesn't know. Like, I've been told that she's definitely died. And it's true. But because of everything and all the gaslighting and stuff like that, I don't know. I feel like that having done this, it could all kick up tomorrow. And then the world fucking hates me again. That's genuinely what I feel like on the inside. But yeah. So... I think I'm going to wrap it up there, people. Also, there's something very strange about it being about 15 years and it being episode 150. I had a friend like 3 years ago say, let this be the year of healing and telling my story. And there have been people I've spoken to the last 4 years, and I've been like, yeah, I'm ready to tell my story. And actually, another part of it is, and I think I mentioned this right at the beginning, I never wanted to do this as a YouTube video, because then it's all focused on this like video. Whereas doing a live stream, this is kind of like, it's a part of my cadence. Like, doing this as a live stream in many ways is risky. And I had a friend last night tell me, I'd probably pre-record it. Don't do it as a live stream, because then you might missay something. I think this has gone pretty well. I've had 150 episodes or 149 episodes to practice this. But yeah, I'm looking at the chat. I've been looking at the chat from time to time, and sorry if I've missed things. And to be honest, I'll be looking at the chat afterwards for sure. But I just wanted to stay focused, because there was a lot to go through with these messages. And despite everything, she was an incredibly talented human being that was unfortunately rolled an unfortunate dice when it came to, or dealt the wrong cards is probably the right saying, when it came to like how her mind worked. I don't think she ever intentionally lied about stuff. I think she was caught up in it. And I just think, like, there's that saying, hurt people hurt people. And I think it's true. And I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, some really bad mistakes. And for me, the best kind of apology is change behavior. But I just think about like stuff like, I even saw someone recently who made me really, really happy, and I made a fucking stupid mistake when I met up with them. And it was me just like not being secure in my own skin. And I just realized, like, I don't know, man. I just always wonder, am I ever going to be able to find companionship and happiness and stuff like that? And the reality is, it can happen at any time and stuff like that. So, with that said, I'm going to wrap up because I'm going to be presenting PSVR without Pro in 45 minutes. And thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's nice to have this video now to refer to people if they ever want to know. But sorry if I've missed any of your comments. I will be reading them at a later time. And obviously, if you have any like final thoughts, you can put them in the comment section below. Also, there's going to be a lot of people watching on replay as well. But I don't want to ramble anymore. This has been going on a while, and I want to keep this concise. So on that, I just want to say a massive thank you, everyone, for listening to my story. I'm sure the emotions of doing this will come out in the minutes that happen as soon as I close this off. Myles, one of my favourite quotes is 100 bad days make 100 good. Well, okay, I was going to just end the live stream, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to end it the way that I normally end it. So we're going to have the end tune and a chance for people to say your final thoughts. If you have any final thoughts, let me know and I'll throw it on screen. I doubt I'll come back on camera. But yeah, and no, I know that. Presenting the show is going to do me a lot of good. It's going to do me a lot of good. So expressing my love for you in the form of cash. Thank you, JPEG. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'm on a quest for empathy, and I'm a very flawed human being that is damaged, and I'm always trying to do what I can to make things right. And this, you know, yeah, this has been definitely the defining story of my life, and it's interesting that all these years later I can finally say this. But yeah, it's a story that when I tell people, they can't fucking believe it. And maybe it could become a movie someday. I genuinely wouldn't want that. But yeah. All right, people, going to end it there. Thank you so much. I love you all. This is why online community is something I've always believed in, because it allows people to share experiences. If he hadn't shared of his experience, I'd be probably living for many more years in complete confusion and just like never knowing what the truth is. And the truth is, I never 100% know, but it's like as close as you're going to get to 100% as possible. So yeah, much love, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and we'll speak next week. So on that note, take care, love, respect, empathy. Adios till next time. Much love all. Thank you.
chasing sunsets all alone. The darkness faded, painting goodbye big sky. Far away but dreaming of your ocean eyes.
I said I wasn't coming back, but I'm back. Incredibly kind words from people. I've also had some texts from some people very close to me in my life who I'm going to be responding to afterwards. It's amazing when you talk about things, how things can come out, and even stuff out of hours and hours of therapy you don't understand. And I kind of like, you're always discovering about why you are in certain ways. And I think that understanding of why I'm always so busy, it's because it's always been to keep me away from dealing with the void of not knowing what the fuck the truth is and stuff. Has been quite powerful. So yeah, not going to ramble on much more. Just wanted to come back and say I'm glad people took something positive from this. I am just one story, and you know, it's not to take away from the negativity, but like in the grand scheme of things, I was talking to my friend earlier today, like in the grand scheme of things, I'm very lucky. I live in a country that's in peace. I haven't had any bad illnesses or anything like that. Like, life is a mixed bag, and you can be dealt a really bad hand or a really good one or somewhere in between. And I feel like generally in life I've been dealt a really good hand. It's just there's one particular card that fucked it all up. And so it's about dealing with the others. So yeah, I'm gonna chill for a bit, and then I'm looking forward to doing this show. But thank you everyone. Really appreciate it. Much love.